Hello, friends. Patrick McFarland here of the Liberty Weekly podcast. This is episode 108, and the show notes may be found at libertyweekly.net/108. And I am joined by a friend of the show and longtime listener of the podcast, Jared Nordin. And the reason that I'm inviting Jared on is because Jared just recently launched his own podcast, which is the Voluntary Contrarian. And that may be found in the show notes page at libertyweekly.net/108. So I'm really excited to be having this conversation with Jared. I'll pitch it over to you, Jared. How's it going, man?
It's going great, Patrick. I really appreciate you having me on and kind of just shooting the breeze for a while.
Hell yeah. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your podcast and kind of why you started it?
Well, I would say that I've been kind of in the libertarian movement, voluntarist movement for probably the past, 10-ish years. And I didn't quite know what I was kind of turning into back then. I just knew that things weren't really kind of making sense in my head as far as it pretty much came up one time. I was getting into it with somebody. I was a real big conservative, pro-war kind of guy, and they were talking about some, kind of progressive issue, and I was staunchly against what they were talking about. And then I don't know, it's a day or two later, I was heard a story about kind of a pro-gun or anti-gun type message, and it made me think, well, hey, I want to have my rights and my liberties. And then all of a sudden it hit me that, well, who am I to say that one person can't do what I don't want them to do, but I want to have that freedom to do what I want to do. And that's the moment where it kind of clicked for me. The light bulb went on, and I realized that there was something I really need to kind of dig into and understand about my rationalization and the way I thought about life and the world. And that led me to more of a libertarian mindset. And once you start kind of digging into that, you go from, obviously a lot of folks come through at it through Ron Paul. I came at it from actually a different podcast I was listening to. It was called we almost kind of came through this at the same time. Actually, his thinking kind of led mine, but it really kind of made me stop and think. He talked a lot about a lot of pro-liberty, pro-libertarian concepts. And so I took those and would start kind of looking things up online. And then I found out about, Rothbard and his contemporaries, and that led me to Austrian economics and Mises and Menger and all those great thinkers. And so, you know how it goes. Once you start, it's really hard to put the brakes on because it's just so interesting, and I just couldn't get enough information and knowledge out of it.
Well, what was the name of that first podcast? I didn't catch it.
It was called the Survival Podcast, and the host's name is Jack Spirko. He's actually been on.
Yeah, he was on Mance Raider, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No. That's super interesting. Yeah. So, and what was the time frame for this? Like, so when did you listen to him, and when did he turn you on to that?
I was having, that was probably, that had to be actually early or maybe mid 90s.
Okay.
But I didn't hear his podcast till probably, gosh, I forget how long he's been doing his podcast for, but it was pretty much since he started. I believe, he's at the episode, he's in the 2000s as far as episodes now. So it's hard to really give a good answer for that question. I'm not quite sure how long it's been, but long enough for me to go through a lot of thoughts. I guess things that kind of rattling my own brain as far as, take this topic and see how it fits, and take this topic and see how it fits. And once you start doing that for so long, everything kind of becomes more streamlined. But sorry, I can't really answer that question though.
No, it's all right. I mean, like, one thing that I've found with the libertarian community is that we're all really, I mean, you have to be someone who is willing to entertain very radical ideas, because you don't run into people that are at where we're at just by a default position. You know what I mean? We all come from some place and we arrive at this place. And so it's always interesting, as a podcast host, I mean, one of the big questions is like, okay, what were you and how did you get here?
Yeah. Yeah, that's, back in time and really think through the beginning, so I could actually kind of plot those steps just for my own, I guess, at my own knowledge, I guess. But it just seems like the past few, probably, I don't know, 7, 8 years have been kind of a blur as far as the things that you learn and how you all kind of make them cohesive in your mind. Yeah, that's again, that's a tough one. I should really put some deep thought into that sometime, so I can almost get a timeline to see where the greatest steps were taken and where it kind of became clarity. I guess for a while, I was a minarchist for a while, and because I was very much, at one time I wanted to be a cop. At one time, I considered going to the military. But I think underlying everything, and this is going to sound kind of, or not bad, but just kind of interesting maybe to some, but I've always been, since as a child, I've always been very anti-authority. And not just in government authority, but anyone. It wouldn't matter if it was a teacher or a principal or someone else's parent. I didn't go out of my way to be, but I just knew for some reason that they didn't have the right to talk to me that way or to force me to do things their way, just because, just by virtue that they were older, or they had a title next to their name, or they had taken an oath or said some magic words or something. It didn't matter to me. So it doesn't matter to me.
I really feel the same way too, because I was like that when I was a kid, and towards my parents and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, from my perspective, I guess I've only really been a voluntarist for about 3 years. So you're like the OG a little bit compared to where I'm at. But at the same time, it really feels like I've thought this way for a long time, it feels like to me. And to me, it feels like I've always kind of thought this way, and I've always been a voluntarist. But no, I mean, going back, I can remember where I didn't think this way, and I venerated the military. And in terms of, I mean, I was kind of like a Republican, founding fathers worshiping kind of paleo conservative, more conservative than paleo, perhaps. So it's an interesting kind of transition, even from your perspective. For some reason, it's surprising to me that you were like a pro-war conservative.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was. I grew up. Well, I was born in 1970, so I'm an older guy. But I remember the Cold War during the 80s with and Gorbachev, and I was interested at that time, even as a young teenager, in what was going on. And I used to watch movies, like Red Dawn and Rambo and things like that, and that kind of thing really entertained me and really kind of excited that inner combativeness, I guess, and kind of that pro-USA. At this point, nostalgia. An article over Everything Voluntary under the the name enemy of the state of kind of my best recollections of my journey through or from where I was to where I actually am now. But yeah, it was an interesting time back then. There was a lot of pro-USA things going on. There was the Olympics, I believe, in, gosh, I'm probably gonna get this wrong, but I think it was '88, somewhere in the States, and a lot of red, white, and blue. And the time it was a really good time to be alive and be pro-USA, because it seemed like a lot of things were going, quote, our way. But I didn't see the other side of what was going on until later in life. The different so-called wars and interventions that back then you didn't know about. At least I didn't know about them. We didn't have the advantage of having the internet and speculation and controversy as much. You had op-eds in the paper, but usually those people you kind of look at as kooks and trying to stir the pot. But nowadays you can get more resources and more official, I guess, for lack of a better term, resources on different things going on. For example, Scott Horton is an excellent example of a person who knows a crap ton about foreign relations. And if I had a Scott Horton back then, yeah, I probably would have made that transformation years ago.
Yeah, he really cuts to the bone with his content. And I mean, we were talking before we went on just about how people like him and people like Keith from the podcast can just, they drop things over and over again and they just make you feel inadequate in some ways.
Right.
Well, you were mentioning everything voluntary. So why don't you talk a little bit about your website, and we'll definitely be dropping links in the show notes page for everyone to check out.
Well, I've been entertaining the idea of having a podcast well, actually, it was kind of something I wanted to do about a year ago, but back then I figured I'd start off with just writing, and I had kind of found some contacts and made some friends of people just via Facebook, and I asked, well, first of all, Everything Voluntary is ran by a guy named Skylar Collins, and he has actually, what is he up to now? I think he has his main podcast. He just started a second, or sorry, is it a third podcast now? Anyway, he's really pushing out the podcast. Well, I hit him up just for some advice on how to start a podcast, and he pretty much just said, "Hey, man, here's how you got to do it. I'll set you up with what kind of gear I recommend, and to a guy who writes music for intros and outros, and I had him make me kind of a theme song, I guess, or a tune for the podcast." But it was around beginning of January this year. I just kind of had a harebrained idea. I thought, you know what? I think by the end of the month, I want to have my own podcast. I just felt like I kind of wanted to add my voice to the many voices that I have respected for so long. I listened to your podcast a lot, and a lot of other great libertarian podcasts, and I wasn't quite sure what I had to offer. All I knew is I had a lot of passion for it, and I figured, as well, actually going back to Jack Spirko, his podcast, he pretty much inspired me too, because he would tell people, if you have an idea to do something, the first step is just to do it, and then learn as you go. And I had to get over a lot of fears as far as going into this, because I know for a fact I am no authority on voluntarism. I don't know everything. All I knew is that I just wanted to share what I do know and maybe help inspire others. But I got to thank Skylar Collins for helping me out and getting me the information and the tools and knowledge to get going.
Hell
so
yeah.
Please check him out. Yeah, so please check out his page, check out his podcast.
Yeah, we'll drop those links in the show notes page too. But I totally agree. I mean, that is the way to go. So I was thinking I had parallels even to my career with the law. I mean, those are a lot of the same feelings too when you jump on you. Sometimes you don't really know what you're doing, and the only way to learn is to go headlong into the fray and just keep kind of pushing forward. That's just the way to do it. And I think you're doing a great job, and everyone, I mean, I've always pushed on my show that I think everyone should be doing a podcast just to, if only just for your own self, to have a documentation of like, okay, this is who I was at this point in time, and I can go back and listen to it. And at the same time that I was doing it, it really brought me a lot of peace of mind just to get my thoughts out there and to feel like I was actually doing something and affecting people and affecting change in the world, and not just having these own thoughts in my mind, but actually presenting them to people, and in a way really showing your underbelly and being vulnerable too. You put your thoughts out there and people say what they will, and that's fine, but it can be tough at times. So why don't you talk a little bit? You're about 7 episodes in, right? And there's a topic I wanted to discuss with you that you addressed in your last episode. But your first episode, you went right to the IRS website and tackled the reasons why they justified taxation. So I think that's a pretty interesting topic. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what your experience has been, and then what about your first episode, and then we'll maybe dive into your most recent one here.
Well, the first episode, I was trying to just find something I was really passionate about, and that I figured was a very common thread throughout the voluntary community. And we're all about taxation is theft, and so I was just kind of going through some websites and just trying to find some inspirations. And then I found their own irs.gov website, and they had under frequently asked questions, why do I have to pay taxes? And I was like, oh, okay, let's see what the authority says on this. And I like I said in my podcast, I read through that probably 4, 5, 6 times, their reasoning behind why I have to pay, or why anybody has to pay taxes. And I was just appalled at it was just like platitudes. There was nothing of substance there at all. And I was surprised that they could have at least given some BS. They gave a little bit of stats here and there about, well, this is our GDP and yada yada, but it didn't compel me, and it shouldn't compel anyone to go, oh, okay, yeah, great, that's a great reason, and now I feel all warm and fuzzy. Anyway, that was kind of the inspiration for the first podcast. It was just one of the things where I just couldn't believe that those, like I said in the podcast too, that somebody wrote this up and pushed it up the chain, and someone higher up in the IRS read it, and they're like, yeah, this is a good answer right here. Just put it out on the website, that kind of thing. That's pretty much the inspiration for the first podcast. And what was your next question? Your second question?
Yeah, well, so as you've started, what has been your experience so far in terms of, have you gotten any feedback? Have you gotten iTunes ratings, or have people bitched about you and called you out yet?
No one's called me out yet. I mean, I only have, I think, 5 subscribers right now. So I'm sure maybe one of them is Skyler himself. So I probably have 4 other people out there who, for some reason, want to hear me talk. But no, I haven't received any feedback yet. I've been bracing for it. Again, I have a tendency to ramble sometimes or repeat myself. So like I said about the whole getting into it, you're going to make those and become more streamlined. And I guess I'm just kind of putting out the podcasts where sure they might have a message that I would like to talk about, At the same time, I know that I'm probably not being as direct, or I'm not being as composed as I could be. But I think with time that'll happen. I'll get better at it, and I appreciate those who are listening to me right now. So far, I have not received anything. I did. Skylar did send me a. I forget what kind of chart it was, but it showed downloads. And there was one episode I did. I forgot which one it was, but it kind of spiked upwards a little bit. But I'm not quite sure. You know what? Maybe from 2 to 5 downloads. I'm not sure what it meant, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, definitely. And like, so when I started, and you got to get on some level, you got to get the Tom Woods bump. But another reason, why we're doing this is because I would really suggest that everyone check out your podcast. And of course, we'll have the link in the show notes page below. So hopefully we get you some numbers here. Definitely, I mean, while you have all the intrinsic benefits of helping yourself out, it definitely helps when there are people on the other end. And then when you start getting feedback and even when people, I mean, Jared, you reached out to me like 2 years ago and we were talking about, how you're listening to the show. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not just pressing a button and uploading an audio file to the website and then nothing happens. I'm not just sitting in my apartment talking to the wall and there's actually people on the other end. Oh my God. But I remember when we first started, and one of the first people to give myself and Jerry feedback when we first started the show was someone who had the screen name of H. Reardon. And at the time, I was not familiar with Ayn Rand at all, and I didn't make the connection between the name H. Reardon and Ayn Rand. So I remember going on the show and saying, "Oh, we got feedback from someone named H. Reardon," without any like click in my mind of what that name meant. So it was really funny to me, man. But yeah, so your last episode that you had, let's move into some controversial territory here. Put you on the spot. You really were kind of I wanted to say too that your episode never sounds as bad as it does in your own mind once you've recorded it. You know what I mean? So when you're going through it and you're thinking like, oh, I should have said this. I should have said that. Oh, I should have said this. Oh, I didn't phrase this the right way. I wonder how people will take it. Well, it never comes across as bad as it does in your own mind. So, yeah, man. But what were you saying in episode 7 that like, you really worry that the libertarian community is just kind of like an echo chamber. What do you think about that?
Well, I was kind of going through. I made a list of podcast topics that I'd like to do more research into and come up with some better content. And a few of them, I just realized that there are people out there who have just done a way better job with those topics than I could ever do. I mean, we're talking about in that podcast 7, I was talking about how I found the modern monetary theory to be really interesting. But then I heard a podcast that was, like I said, a debate style between, geez, I'm drawing a blank here now.
Bob Murphy?
Yeah, Bob Murphy, and I forget the other person in that debate. But I mean, the guy, what doesn't that guy know about economics? So if you want to know about modern monetary theory, you go to Bob Murphy. And who am I to add extra dialogue to that conversation? So on my list of things is there's a few topics that would take a lot of research into, and again, I don't have a lot of time with a full-time job and a wife and 2 crazy German shepherds. So I would love to, but I just don't. So it got me thinking about, well, maybe I can just kind of speak on what I know and more direct topics as they pertain to voluntarism. And I started thinking about how many podcasts, again, are already out on those things, and do I really need to add my voice to that mix? And especially because it seems like we, I really value our community. I value the people in it and their knowledge, and just the fact that they, abide by the NAP, and we're very supportive of each other. And I really value those things. But I think it all kind of relates to recent experiences on social media where, I forget which podcast it was, but I kind of gave 5 tips in order to relate with others compassionately, without using, any kind of ad hominems or profanity, and more kind of a Socratic type question and answer, I guess, philosophy, or whatever you want to call it. And so I was really trying to stick to those principles, but it just seemed like either they would just kind of just go right at you and attack you for just being a person who thinks differently from them, or they would ignore you, or they would attack you with all the profanity they could think of. Which brings me to the libertarian voluntarist community. You can relate with them, and we may have some minor disagreements here and there, or different definitions of philosophy, but everybody in the community pretty much knows about exactly what you know. And that, it got me thinking that it's really difficult to not push our ideas, but to pull people ever so slightly in the direction of peace. And that kind of gave me a lot of discouragement, because although it's been, I forget how many years, again, how long I've been kind of thinking this way, and talking with people, but nothing really seems to change or to help anyone, like I said, even give it a little tug our direction. And so that was kind of the basis behind that podcast, was kind of just a overall frustration of how nothing really seems to be advancing, and it just seems to be getting more and more polarized, and people like us are kind of left out of the conversation. Although, in my belief, and I'm sure your belief, we have the best answer, the best peaceful, cogent, rational, and compassionate answer.
Yeah, I mean, definitely I've confronted the same problem, and I think that generally speaking, when it comes to social media is the biggest problem. And I'm the biggest one to kind of condemn social media, because it really has created this antagonistic environment, especially with, hiding behind a keyboard, or having only 280 characters to really express your ideas, and kind of the impatience too, and the impersonal nature of discourse, especially with the internet. I guess the ways that I've confronted it, and especially becoming an attorney, because, excuse me for that, especially becoming an attorney, because when I became an attorney, there were maybe 2 or 3 people that really came out of the woodwork on social media. And these were people who just, from all I could tell, had just become ANCAPs or voluntarists, and were just completely berating me for being a bootlicker and a redcoat and a traitor, and becoming part of the system and condemning it. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't really, I mean, on some level, I do admit, yeah, you become part of the system. But on another level, it's one thing to condemn these things while sitting on the sideline, and then another thing to try and affect the system while you're in it and working within it. And that's a difficult thing to do. One is like playing the game and walking the walk, and another one is just talking the talk. But I think the way that I've confronted it, and I have gotten exasperated with the libertarian community too myself on social media, but I think the best way to confront that is to understand that it's okay to disagree with people. And on some level, you need to stop casting these moral judgments against other people, even though we have our way of seeing the world and we have our beliefs and we have our convictions. And I believe in that 110%, but I'm not going to sit here and condemn specific individuals because I haven't walked a day in their life. You know, I have my ideas, but I haven't been on that level. And I guess it's being humble and trying to stay in your lane and affect what you can affect, and trying not to get wrapped up in things that you can't control. It's like the stoicism, you know, just trying to change what you can change and let go of the things that you can't change. So yeah, what do you think about that? I don't know.
No, you're absolutely right there. I think I think most of it's happened after I started my pod. I was kind of reborn. I really wanted to and also kind of try to use my own five rules or 5 tips for having conversations online. And I think I probably got a little bit too overzealous when it came to trying those methods out. And it just was an instant kickback, and it really kind of exposed me again to how ugly social media is. But, you know, you're totally right that, you know, and I understand it too, that's the way that we have to live. We have to allow people to be themselves and do what they're going to do. It's just that I have this, I guess, some passion for the message that sometimes I might just get a little carried away and try a little bit too hard instead of being a little bit more passive and and just kind of doing what I can. So yeah, I fully agree with you.
Well, and it's not like I'm a white knight either, because I'm sure if you look through my Twitter history, you'll see some things. But I've been trying to be more humble throughout it, and just not really. I mean, I'm a nice person, and we're all nice people. I think when you really get down to brass tacks, you can talk a big game behind a keyboard, but in reality, I think sometimes I've just found that I haven't blocked a lot of people, but I've found that blocking people and just walking away is the best solution. Because you want to sit down and smoke from the peace pipe, but at the same time, you know, we all have lives that we're trying to live and whatnot. So at least personally, you know, and maybe this conversation is a testament to what I'm about to say, but the biggest satisfaction I've gotten from the show has been meeting people in the liberty movement and making friendships and talking to people and having these connections. You know, I've really been enjoying the Friends Against Government podcast lately, and the Rollo and Slappy show, and you know, a bunch of those guys, Dino Files. I mean, I could keep naming names all day long, but Mance Raider, you know, having these friendships and these connections has really enriched my life. So, have you made any of those connections yet? And if not, what can I do to help you on that direction? You know?
I have not made any connections aside from you and Skylar. No, I mean, yeah, there's so many great people out there doing some great work. And I mean, I feel a little bit too humble to be in their circle. I know I'm kind of a new guy on the block, and I've got to kind of take my lump and, I guess, to a point, prove my worthiness, I guess. Not to put myself down or anything, but yeah, I mean, I don't expect any kind of instant friendships or relations to anybody who's been there, done that, and is just crushing it right now.
Well, that'll come in when you focus on things like I'm not to say that, because I don't believe that I'm someone who, have made all these connections with all these people or whatever, but well, I guess I have in some sense. I don't know. We're all big community and I think we're all friends, and that's the fun part, when you just kind of you set your presuppositions aside and you realize that we're all just a bunch of people looking to have a good time, and the technology, the internet, has been able to bring us a lot closer together. And if you just reach out to other people and have really candid conversations like this, it really feels like you're making direct connections with people. Like, we're having this conversation right now. It's just the two of us. There's no audience, it doesn't seem like, but I guess, 1,000 people listen to this, but it's not real to me at all, because the only feedback and the only recognition that I get from actually talking to 1,000 people are maybe the 2 or 3 people that will reach out to me. And then the rest of it is just numbers on a screen. And from my perspective, it's just you and I having a conversation that, for all I know, no one else will hear, It's a weird thing. It's a really weird thing.
Yeah, I think that the best thing that can probably come of this, of my podcast, is that I will get to meet more like-minded people, that maybe that sense of discouragement I had in, that I kind of expressed in episode 7 will hopefully abate a little bit, knowing that there's a lot of people out there I can relate to, and realize that there are a lot of people, like yourself, and me, and a lot of people. You're not born a voluntarist. You become one over time. And I realize people that I may relate to are kind of on their own journey, just like I was on my own journey. So I think, yeah, that would be a great bonus, is just to kind of become part of the community, and to kind of open those channels of communication to others that kind of encourage each other, and kind of say, hey, you're doing some good work, and keep it up. We value your voice among us, and let's just fight the fight together.
Hell yeah. And that's why I like being patient too, because we were all at that point, and I was at that point, and it took someone like my co-host Jerry to sit me down in college, because I was like, oh, I didn't know crap about crap. And I was like, I remember I was so I was on the way to class one day, and he was messing around with the TV and the base in the living room. Jerry was, and we got robbed from when we lived there. This exchange that I'm about to describe happened before we got robbed from in this living room. But I was getting ready to leave for class one day, and I don't know, because Jerry wasn't going to school anymore, because he wisely, in my opinion, dropped out and stopped paying such exorbitant fees. But he was messing around with the TV, and I was like, oh yeah, we got to talking about libertarianism. I was whining about being in class and all this social justice warriors and whatnot. And he's like, so you're a libertarian, huh? I was like, yeah, I like Reason magazine, because I didn't know crap about crap. And he I don't know, at that point in time, a libertarian like me would have been like, Reason magazine, you pissant, like you beltway libertarian. But he wasn't, he was like, well, I quibble with Reason magazine, but yeah, you're a libertarian and you like Ron Paul, and we were all sitting around one night, and he was talking to me about Stefan Molyneux. And at the time, Steph was a bit more, acceptable in the libertarian community, but he really encouraged me on that path. And I think we need to keep in mind that, there are different stages of the journey, and especially if we're going to be bringing people into the movement, we need to accept that fact and be forgiving. I mean, what else can we do?
Right, and also to add to that, is that because there are so many different venues, as far as there's YouTube, which is where I started watching Stefan Molyneux, and he really kind of changed my thinking a lot too. So I think that there are different things you need to hear at different times, and different aspects of voluntarism, libertarianism, that you kind of pick up a little bit from each person along the way, and not every voice you hear will be the one that you kind of grab onto. You know what I mean? Some folks may be a little bit more abrasive, or a little bit too soft, and they're all coming from their own viewpoint. So it's kind of like just a mosaic of experiences that kind of complete the picture.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that is tremendous because, thinking back, I started off with Ron Paul really spoke to me as being a founding fathers conservative type, whatever. Then Stefan Molyneux helped me a little bit along the way with the story of your enslavement, and that's what really spoke to me. And then Tom Woods got me, and he spoke to my conservatism with nullification and all these principles. Then I hopped on to Jeff Deist, and then I hopped on the Rothbard train, and then I just moved through all these different people. James Corbett, who is maybe a bit more of a left-leaning person, but still in the conspiracy world, but still a voluntarist. Really spoke to me too tremendously, and actually was my inspiration for starting the show. Was Tom Woods and James Corbett, which are two, I don't know, they're not diametrically opposed figures, but they're two very different figures with very different ways of coming towards the philosophy itself. So that's a very astute observation there. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna. I had actually. I forget if it was a couple years ago. I was in Seattle for a Mises conference, and had the pleasure to see Tom Woods and a few other guest speakers there. Where I forget how they did the drawing, but I ended up winning I think it was a Mises silver coin. And met Jeff Deist, and that was fun. It was a great community up there too. There's actually one coming again this year in Seattle, but according to their webpage, it's still undetermined as far as when and where. I wish I knew, because I want to put those dates away and go again. I mean, it was great to be among so many people that you just kind of felt at home with.
Yeah, definitely. And I haven't even made it to so the only really, I spoke at one conference, and this has been it was an episode of the show where I kind of talked about the Revolutionary War and the Dangerous History podcast a little bit. But that was in the Twin Cities area, and that was, I don't know if it was a year ago or a little bit. So that was a great experience, but that's the only real conference I've been to aside from Freedom Fest. And at Freedom Fest, I met Peter Schiff and Bob Murphy. And this was when I had first started the show. I didn't have the podcast, but I had the website and a blog. And Bob Murphy was so super nice to me. And I would have been really, I would have been more starstruck had I been where I'm at now. But I just remember talking to him, and he signed, I bought his book Choice, and he signed it. And he was so really nice to me. And yeah, so that really has an effect on people.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to, so as we're closing up here, Jared, I wanted to ask you, I've been really interested in what you do for fun, man, because I've seen some pictures of you on Facebook just going out in the wild and roughing it. So talk a little bit about that, man.
Well, actually, it's been about a year now since we've actually done some really good outdoor activities. It's been up here in Washington, guide myself. I'm not really bigly enough, but summertime is a great time to go out and get in the woods, especially up here in the Northwest. But yeah, we're looking. My wife and I are looking forward to getting back out there this summer and spending some time outdoors. And this time we're going to bring our dogs with us and get them introduced to hiking and do some camping. And that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's. I mean, you got the sea, you got the ocean, you got Pacific Ocean, you know, a couple hours away. You got the Cascades, you know, an hour and a half, 2 hours away. So we're kind of right in the middle of great activities out here, especially in the summertime.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, around here we got the Chequamegon Forest, as we call it. So it's a big, like, I don't know if it's a state forest or a national forest in north central Wisconsin. So you can go into that. But the bigger thing is the boundary waters that are up between Minnesota and Canada. So you get, you know, the glacial lakes that have been cut into the countryside with a lot of forests. So you can, I really like to canoe, and I really like to, we have some Kevlars, and you can portage and do some camping and fishing and stuff like that. So that's really cool too. I've been trying to get my cousins to bring me ice fishing with them because I haven't done ice fishing around here. And we bought a house on the lake. You can't really see it. I grew up on this lake, but I ended up buying a house 4 doors down. It's a man-made lake that is in the Titanic. So Jack Dawson talks about how he was ice fishing on this lake, and he broke through the ice. But when the Titanic sank, this lake had not even been made yet. So it makes you wonder who was the writer who wrote in this lake into the movie, who probably was from this area, maybe, and knew that it hadn't been made. I don't know. But so there's a lot of really cool stuff to do around here. But yeah, the outdoor stuff is a lot of fun, man.
It really is, and it's kind of that break you need some time to get out and the state behind you, and it's very very where you're out overnight or a couple nights. What life is more about, just kind of being where and that all when you're out. Having some,
Hey, are you still with me, Jared? Maybe you want to turn your camera off, because I think we're having just some technical difficulties here. It's with the audio cutting out. All right. Well, if we lost Jared, I'll just wrap up the show here. Episode 108. Show notes may be found at libertyweekly.net/108. And Jared, if you come back, just cut in here. But definitely go check out Jared's podcast, The Voluntary Contrarian. I'll put the show notes, the link in the show notes, of course, as always. I'd just like to reiterate to the audience that I've restarted and kicked up the Liberty Weekly email list, and I definitely suggest that you guys all join that email list. I'm doing Tom Wood style emails, kind of a little bit of like a book review list too. And so I've been having a lot of fun with that. I think you'll really enjoy it. Also, Patreon. I have been trying to, if I'm doing an interview with someone, I've been trying to throw up the link in the live stream link into the Patreon group so you can watch that. We also have a ton of bonus content and bonus shows. You get stuff like my free ebooks, access to the Liberty Weekly meme cache and stuff like that, a personalized thank you email from me as well. So really do like that. And Jared, are you back with us here?
Yeah, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you did. And I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit when you were talking about your experience with the great outdoors, man.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that. I'm not sure. Probably on my end. Yeah, I was just kind of going on about I forget exactly what I said, but I'm sure it was eloquent and really inspirational.
Hell yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely. It's really hard to describe exactly how awesome it is to sit out under the stars, you know, or to be out and hear wolves howling to each other and stuff. It's really special.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So is there anything you'd like to say just before we sign off here? I kind of plugged your material before. I don't know if you heard that or not.
Yeah, I heard. I appreciate it, and I really appreciate you having me on your show, Patrick. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and the whole community. I appreciate all their great work that's out there, and yeah, if you get a chance, stop by and check out the podcast. Hey, I'm a rookie here, so you don't expect much greatness yet, but yeah, again, thanks a lot, and I'm looking forward to see what comes of this.
Hell yeah, man. Well, definitely not the last time. So we'll get you back on the show in the future, and everybody go check out Jared's podcast.
All right, thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, peace.